This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Hello and welcome to this week's episode, where my guest is former jewellery designer to the stars, turned social media veg grower, Lucy Hutchins. Along with music festival organiser Kate Cottrell, Lucy set up She Grows Veg, an heirloom seed company, which is bringing the most unusual veg, fruit and edible flowers to veg patches and plates everywhere. Listen on as Lucy talks about the idea behind the company and the amazing varieties she has on offer.
I think I probably didn't have the most conventional route into horticulture in general, let alone food growing, that most people had, because I had a completely different career before this one. So I used to work in fashion and make kind of jewelry for celebrities and big glossy magazines and things, which probably sounds a little bit like a dream career, but it didn't actually make me happy. And I think you need to be happy with what you do. You spend so much of your life working that what you do should fulfill you. So I kind of reached a bit of a turning point in the business where I got, should we say, a moment of clarity. And I realized I wasn't happy. So I decided to kind of give it all up. But all through that time, all through the decade or so that I worked in fashion, and before that, when I was at art school, even back when I was a kid, I always grew a few edible plants. Did not know what I was doing at all. I don't think I did it with any level of skill. It was more ambition and just mucking around than anything else. But around the end of 2017, I was going through a bit of a stressful period, as we all do now and again. I just kind of needed something that was completely removed from the situation and something that was all mine and was just pure happiness for me. And so it was to the food growing that I turned. But I never do anything by half measures. It's not really my way. So turning to food growing was deep diving into heritage and heirloom varieties and forgotten edibles, and learning as much as I could about unusual crops and ornamental crops that you could eat. Anything like that I was fascinated by. And I set up my Instagram account at the same time. And then it all kind of grew from there. I hesitate to say, I don't know if it's a little bit cliche to say it grew organically, but it did.
Yeah, amazing. And it makes me laugh because it's such a common story. And I wonder if there's any other profession where people come to it because they've got disillusioned with their career and they're looking for a way to find fulfillment. It's just such a common theme.
It is. Yeah, I think there's a lot of career changes in horticulture. And I have to say, I mean, it was particularly marked for me because you couldn't kind of get two more different industries than the fashion industry and the horticulture industry. But it was like coming home, and everyone is so lovely. You know, you get the odd exception with anything, that's just life. But I would say as a general rule, 99.9% of people in this industry are lovely. And I think that maybe is partly because a big proportion of them have come to it just to find happiness, because it's something that gives pure joy.
Yeah, I mean, you have a job that you're not necessarily that invested in on an emotional level, or it doesn't bring you fulfillment, and then you move into horticulture and that then gives you this, it's a package of things, particularly with the food growing. You know, you're connected to the soil, it's something that is grounding, it's mindful, it's got all the mental health stuff wrapped up in it, it's got the nutrition side, which is really important and is possibly something people neglect when they've got really busy jobs and everything. And it ties into so many different things. It becomes a touch point to things that actually matter to you on a human level and a spiritual level and an emotional level. And, it's really interesting. But then I think actually once you get to that point, I then wonder if maybe you progress even further past that. And the gardening is like a kind of gateway to almost more of a spiritual thing. Do you honestly feel like, through gardening, you're achieving something that's adding to you on a kind of human level?
I definitely think so. I think whether consciously or unconsciously, I think it fulfills people on a really kind of almost base level, because, it's really not that long ago that we were hunter-gatherers and we were completely and utterly dependent on nature and the environment for every single thing that we needed. And we knew, we were completely in tune with that. And in a relatively short space of time, we've moved as far away from that as you could possibly move. And now, our lives are so screen-based. We spend so much of our time working, and generally it is not something that is involving plants and nature and things. We've moved so very far away from that innate connection with the environment around us. that something in us, I think, still calls to it and is still fulfilled by being surrounded by it. So I think that's probably part of the reason that so many people find a level of fulfillment in horticulture that you wouldn't necessarily find in other areas. And I mean, it's not for everyone, it's a bit of a gross generalization, but I do think, I've noticed, like you have, that there are a lot of people that just really flourish once they find, a path in horticulture and a way just to be around plants.
So bringing it back to your company, can you tell us a little bit about it? Obviously, you mentioned the heirloom open pollinated seeds aspect of it, but what was the idea behind it?
Well, it kind of grew out of this path. It started right back at the beginning where I started that research on these unusual varieties and different kinds of edibles beyond, all those really conventional things that we're used to growing and eating. And it has been a kind of a journey, really. And this has been like the natural conclusion of it. So I started growing the things that I was finding. And because some of the things that I was finding and I wanted to try and grow were so unusual, I was connecting with unusual growers and seed collectors and breeders and things around the world, and became part of this kind of network of people sharing interesting seeds and interesting varieties. And I started sharing that through social media. And that's kind of what I became known for on social media. When I started that account, I had no agenda whatsoever. I certainly wasn't expecting it to end up as it has, but it just allowed me to interact with an amazing community of people, maybe slightly more open-minded gardeners around the world, and share knowledge and share successes and failures and experiments and things. And I just became known for growing all these amazing, unusual things that you could eat. And inevitably started getting messages from people saying, this is amazing. Where can I get seed for it? How can I grow it? And unfortunately, the answer was you can't, because they just weren't commercially available. So relatively early on, it was probably for the last 5 years or so, I had in the back of my head that I'd like to find a way to offer more interesting seed in the UK. And I looked at so many different ways of potentially doing that. I talked to big seed companies, and very much the answer was, there isn't an appetite for open pollinated seed. People want the dependability of hybrid F1s, they don't want open pollinated seed. And I was like, oh, do you know what? I really don't think that you're right. And I looked at various ways of doing it, and I knew the opportunity was there. I knew it was like, it kind of became this dream. I knew I wanted to do it, but just didn't know how to make it happen because it was too big for just me. And then I reconnected with an old friend of mine, someone I'd studied with at Beth Chatto Gardens. We'd studied garden design together, Kate Cotterill, and we had got on like a house on fire on the course. We sat together on the first day and every day for a year since that. And we reconnected about the show garden that I was doing at Gardeners World Live. And I started talking her through this idea that I had. And she is 100% into marketing and business. And she did all the business research to see if I was right, that there was this appetite and opportunity there. And it was 100% yes, there was this huge gap of what people were being offered. So we just kind of decided to go for it. And it was too much for me, but together we've kind of made the perfect team. And I think it took us 6 months to build the seed company from scratch, with finding suppliers and a way to package the seed and design the packaging and create what we wanted to do, and then launch. And it has been a roller coaster of a year. But here we are. And now we have this amazing selection of heirloom seeds, some more and more interesting ones, like really rare and unusual things being added to the range all the time. And people are just loving it. It's brilliant. It's exactly what I wanted to happen. I wanted people to be inspired and excited by what we were offering. And so far, that is the response we've had. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And I wondered, you mentioned about kind of meeting, networking to find these unusual varieties. Do you ever go digging around through old seed catalogues and things? Is that maybe where you saw stuff from as well?
So a lot of the seed that we have offered, if it's been in a seed catalogue before, it hasn't been in for a really long time. So, we do look at the varieties that the Heritage Seed Library have preserved. What they do and the work that they do is absolutely amazing. And I've been an ambassador for them for years. So being able to look at maybe bringing the odd one of their varieties back into commercial availability is very exciting. I've also worked for a number of years with an American heirloom seed company who travel all over the world and find really rare varieties. And they're kind of mentoring us in setting up this business. And that's Baker Creek. I think a lot of people are probably familiar with them because, again, they're very well known on social media and people really wanted to get hold of their seeds and you can't in the UK. So we're lucky that we've been surrounded by really exciting and knowledgeable people from around the world who are really, really supportive of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it does all sound like it's fallen into place. It's obviously meant to be. Thinking about some of the actual varieties that you've got on offer, are there any that you are like top performers you just wouldn't be without that you could say to people, yeah, get that one. It's a really good one.
Well, my two favorite tomatoes, I mean, everyone knows, I think, that I am crazy for tomatoes and heirloom tomatoes. I have no interest if it's red and round. I don't want to grow it. So my two favorite tomatoes are in the range, and they are two of our best-selling things as well. So people are loving them just as much as me, which is Black Beauty, which is a completely jet black tomato with red flesh inside, which is obviously incredibly striking to look at, but really genuinely delicious. And that's really important for us. You know, it's all well and good saying, you know, these are beautiful varieties and they're really ornamental and things, but they have to taste good because this is about food. And if you're growing it for yourself, it has to back up on flavor and not just on looks. And then also Ananas Noir, which is a tomato that I've grown for years. That's been really tricky to get hold of here. So we're really excited to be able to offer it, which is kind of yellowy, greeny. It's not terribly exciting looking from the outside, but as soon as you slice into it, it's got this amazing tie-dye pattern of red and orange and yellow and green. It's really, really beautiful. So very excited to offer those. And then we've got a pink chicory. It looks like roses. So we've found this amazing guy just outside Venice who preserves ancient Venetian chicory varieties. That's his whole life. And he's amazing. And so he's found this gorgeous pink one that we're selling. Yeah, some really, really interesting ones, but also, you know, they have the culinary credentials as well.
Like you said, sometimes it can look stunning, but actually it doesn't taste fantastic. And sometimes when you see them in the bigger seed catalogues, it can be a bit gimmicky, but it's good to know that you're picking on taste as well as stunning looks. You know, thinking about heirloom varieties that maybe have fallen out of fashion or have sort of stuck to perhaps a particular region because they're suited to those growing conditions. I think some people may think, well, actually, if it's heirloom or, you know, it's not that popular or widely grown, it's for a reason. It's because it's tricky to grow. But have you found that with any of your varieties?
It's kind of a bit of both of the things that you just said, really. You know, I think that open pollinated heirloom heritage, however you want to kind of term it, has had a little bit of a bad reputation for no reason. I think because we are so heavily marketed hybrids in this country by the major seed companies, in that they are, you know, problem solving and they're easier to grow and they're higher yielding and that kind of thing. Actually, I have grown both and I notice remarkably little difference in both. You know, both of them perform perfectly fine. You might get a slightly lower yield on an heirloom variety, but remember, these varieties have been grown for hundreds, even thousands of years in some occasions for some of the things that we're selling, just because they taste good. So no, you may not get quite as many tomatoes on the plant, for example, but if those tomatoes taste absolutely amazing, then I would rather have a few less and then really, really enjoy the flavor. And I think that's the other thing. They have, like you said, been marketed a little bit like a novelty item, you know, like, oh, grow some rainbow carrots. But actually, in the vast majority of cases, this is how the plant is supposed to look. So we've become so used to the vegetables that we see in the aisles of the supermarket that we think that that's what it should be like, that all carrots should be standard size orange and all tomatoes should be red and round. And actually, that's really not how they originally started out. That is how they've been bred to be for uniformity for farming and things. And actually, these novelty heirlooms that we get marketed as a kind of novelty item and have a go at this, that's actually what the plant looks like. You know, carrots should be any color but orange. We bred them to be orange in tribute to the Dutch royal family. So it's kind of two things that I'm kind of actively fighting against and to kind of reprogram people's thinking on it, is that this is the way that plants are supposed to look in a lot of ways. They're supposed to be rainbow colored. They're supposed to be unusual shapes. They're not supposed to be uniform. And that generally these plants taste better. And that's why they've always been grown in the past. And also these older varieties have been grown for many, many, many years. And so actually are really quite well adapted to our environment. This is the plants that were farmed have been farmed for hundreds of years and kept people fed for hundreds of years. So they do perform well, and you are not making your life harder by going for an heirloom variety.
Picking up on what you said there, it actually may be also that it's a case of people have lost a bit of versatility when it comes to cooking and not knowing what to do with things. If you sow a packet of chard seeds, for example, even if they're supposed to be standardized, you'll get one that's got really massive leaves, you'll get one that's slightly more diminutive. They can be really varied. And I would suggest that the ones with the bigger leaves you use in certain recipes, and the ones with smaller leaves you could use maybe raw, or you could, do other stuff with them. But it's knowing how to use them in the kitchen and to just get away from the thinking of chard is chard, because it may not always be. I think that it's very much tied into the cooking side of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think I would like to help make that connection between seeds and the final food a little bit more, because there's kind of a weird disconnect. You get seeds that are very much marketed towards gardeners, and then cooks and chefs will buy their ingredients from suppliers or shops. And actually, a lot of the things, particularly heirloom varieties and things, the type of things that we offer in seed, you cannot buy from the shops. So if you ever want to use those ingredients, the only way that you're going to be able to work with them in your kitchen is to be growing them yourself. And that way you also have complete and utter confidence in the provenance of the food. You know exactly what's gone into it. You know that there's been no chemicals, there's been no unusual things done to it. So you can be completely confident in its nutrition levels, and that it's additive free, and that it's going to be the absolute best nutritionally for you as well. So there's so many benefits to growing the ingredients yourself, but you also are giving yourself this amazing, enormous, inspiring variety of things to work with. And just because it doesn't look like the standard things that you get in the kind of curated offering of the supermarket, actually that's a real plus point, not a negative.
I believe that you're being involved at the Chelsea Flower Show this year, are you?
Yes, we are. We're very excited. Also kind of terrified, but very, very excited to be there. And I think, we've had amazing support from the RHS. We were absolutely blown away to be accepted. We've got a lot to do in the next few months before the show happens. But we just really, really wanted to break the mold that I think grow your own gets put into, because I think as a general rule in this country, everything to do with veg growing and grow your own is very much kind of homespun, traditional, salt of the earth image, dig for victory kind of imagery, which is lovely on one hand, but it's an image that doesn't necessarily resonate with everyone. And we have a lot of ornamental gardeners, particularly going to RHS shows like the Chelsea Flower Show, who maybe don't consider themselves veg growers. And you also have a huge number of people that cook and they like food. Everyone has to eat. So I think everyone can get excited about what they eat. And therefore, every one of those people is a potential food grower. So what we wanted to do was kind of break out of that standard pigeonhole that grow your own gets put in, that's that imagery that you have surrounding it, and show food and edible plants in a totally different way. So we've taken inspiration for our stand from the kind of Renaissance old masters, and we're almost trying to create a display where vegetables, the humble veg, is elevated to the point of art, and show it that way. That's what we want to do. And then also make that connection again between the seeds and them being food, and then the final ingredients. So we're very, very excited to be partnering with Raymond Blanc as well on the stand. So he will be cooking with our vegetables on the stand on press day. And then he's also provided us with a recipe. And then you'll be able to buy the seeds you need to grow to be able to cook the recipe. And we just hope that really just makes that connection as clear as possible. And you couldn't ask for a better advocate in the food industry than Raymond Blanc.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, I love that idea, because veg growing, as you say, can be a little bit, Heath Robinson, and people might not necessarily associate it with gardens that look good ornamentally. I mean, without giving too much away, are there any varieties that you think really do earn a place in an ornamental garden?
I think so. And I think it's also about showing that some of the ornamental plants that are already there are actually amazing food crops. So we sell dahlia seed, for example, but we sell it as root vegetables because that is what dahlias were originally brought to Europe for, as a root crop. So, it's just a little bit of re-education or just changing the way that people see things. So you can have, a beautiful bed of dahlias all summer long and then dig them up and have essentially potatoes. So that kind of thing. We've also got edible trees. So you can grow pomegranates and beef and onion trees, which is Tuna sinensis. You can grow them from seed and you can have trees in your garden that you can eat. There's so many ways that you can approach food in an ornamental setting and have a really, really beautiful garden at the same time.
And just before you go, again, are there any varieties that you think are kind of up and coming and that you don't mind sharing that you're particularly excited about? Or are there any trends, in terms of colours and things that people are looking out for at the moment?
It's amazing. Every single thing that's the best-selling thing on our website is either black or pink. So people love black or pink. And there's some really stunning vegetables of those colours. But we've got some really exciting ones coming up. So we've just introduced a pink celery, which has bright candy pink stems, which is kind of easier to grow than standard celery as well. So that's a Chinese pink celery. We've got an amazing carrot coming in that has been kind of like the stuff of legend on social media, and no one's been able to get seeds for it. So we're very excited to be one of the only places in the world that you're going to be able to get this seed. It's called manjapuki. And it is a carrot that, with a little bit of love, can grow up to 1.5 meters long. It's a Japanese heirloom. With less love, you'll easily get it to 1 meter long, and it's still tender and delicious. But you get a lot of bang for your buck with one carrot. And then we're on a bit of a mission to bring the mangel wurzel back, which is basically something that's gone wildly out of fashion. It's somewhere in between a sugar beet and a beetroot. It's like an absolutely giant beetroot. They're bigger than my head, and they're sweeter. They're less earthy than your standard beetroot. So for people that don't love that earthiness, they're kind of the perfect plant, and you can eat the leaves on top, and they'll stand for a really long time ready in the field before you have to pick them. So we are on a mission to bring back the mangel wurzel.
Thank you very much to Lucy, and thank you as well for listening. And if you're going along to or watching coverage of the Chelsea Flower Show, which starts today, you can check out the She Grows Veg display Edimental there. If you like this interview, I recommend checking out episode 76, Edimentals with Stephen Barstow, released on the 3rd of December 2019, and episode 223, Sky Gardening, with Brent Purtell, released on the 23rd of January 2023. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.